My name is Alan Hyde, and I will be your guide into the world of mental health, recovery, and spirituality. Tonight I'm joined by a very special guest, Kim Francis from the Fingerprints of Grief podcast.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Just switch a mic on us.
Yeah. I was telling my friends we're
flipping the
table.
mic. I love it.
Yeah, and we're also joined by our producer, Gabe. Gabe, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, doing good, man. Thanks for all the help on the technological side.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for, you know.
So tonight, guys, we're going to be talking about grief and loss. Actually, that's one of the main focuses of Kim's show. She interviews ex-pro athletes. She interviews individuals who have experiences with mental health and grief and loss. And this is one of her expertises and one of the things that she talks about on her show. So I figured what a wonderful opportunity after joining you. Yeah, it's
great. When you were just my guest, so it's awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So what started you on the path, just for those who tune in for this show, of doing a podcast on grief and loss?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in. A big part of my background is television and film, from 1997 until 2014. So a trajectory of working for Cablevision, which we owned, or they owned Bravo, the Independent Film Channel, Women's Entertainment, and Fuse, and AMC, American Movie Classics, which they now call AMC Networks. And I always loved the form of the medium for radio and so forth. And then used to do community theater and public speaking. And so just kind of through my journey of life at working with them, the reason I worked for Mark Cuban for almost 6 years, doing the same thing, managing his networks, which at the time was HDNet. We transitioned that to Access TV, what it is today. And then he had HDNet Movies and Magnolia Pictures. So up until 2014, I was doing that. And my mom, who was 61, she was my best friend. She had me when she was 16. She got esophageal cancer. And so she had cancer twice before, and she always beat it. And so I think, we were not aware that she had been feeling very, very ill for a long time. We kept taking her to different doctors. And when it ended up happening was, and this is really important for your listeners as well and viewers, that if you are in a state of chronic acid reflux consistently, and then like my mom's doctors just adding the protonics, higher dosage, but never diagnosing what was underneath that.
Gotcha.
And so we know that had he done that and done an upper endoscopy or upper GI, that they would have found the cancer. And unfortunately, by the time they found it, it was stage 4 and no room for surgery. She couldn't have tolerated the surgery. So quite shocking. Nobody ever wants to hear the C word. And she was 61 and my best friend. And so through about a couple months into her journey with that, I just quit my life. I quit my job with Mark and put all my stuff in storage, and my dogs went to stay with my friends, and I went to move to Lake Texoma to take care of her. And that was, that of it itself was quite traumatic to be a 24/7 caretaker with my stepdad was there, but pretty much my responsibility that I took on. And, you're trying to be strong for them. Yeah. You're trying to be strong for them, and they're scared to death, and, come out of the shower and the hair's coming out and all these things. So, you're trying to be the cheerleader, you're trying to be the strong one. And then just through a series of her treatment, realizing that after 6 months of really heavy treatment, chemo and radiation, she wasn't getting better. And I think that I was in complete shock, and I was trying to stay in some form of a little bit of denial, because she was Superwoman to me, and I just kept thinking she was going to beat it. Yeah. And then finally having the conversation with the doctor and just saying, we just really, kind of getting us to accept it, that she wasn't going to be getting better, and she wanted to keep her comfortable. And then that was, she was a fighter. She didn't want to hear that, and she wanted to keep fighting. And so there's definitely times now when I look back and go, gosh, I wish I would have just said, Mom, let's just go to the beach and live, for 6 months and let her have a peaceful journey to that transition. So for me, she passed away a year later in 2015. Actually, today is the 10-year anniversary of her passing away. And she was 62, and a tremendous loss for the world, for us, for the Grayson County where she worked. And she did a lot of amazing things for less fortunate in the community for a very long time. And she was just an amazing person. She was expressive and loud, and she didn't know a stranger, and everyone loved her. So there was just a lot when that happened. I didn't have a job. I lost my best friend, and then we had a lot of family trauma around her passing. And you really find out. I don't care who you are. If you go through a bad time, you really find out who your friends are,
Oh, sure.
or who your family is in this instance. And so that was a very difficult time for me. So I didn't really even think about the 7 years later when I wrote a story called Facing Grief with God's Grace, and I was in a women's anthology book about soul source and God and going through tough times. And I'm a writer. I've always been a writer. I love to do it, but I hadn't done it a lot. And so a lady encouraged me. She said, I think you should write your story. And then the story kind of took on a life of its own, and it got published. And it was really kind of an anthem, I think, for a lot of my friends and people that they referred it to for how do you address grief. And so I always had in my mind a title for a book, which is on the next step, is to do I want to do an anthology series called Fingerprints of Grief, sports, fingerprints of grief, entertainment, so where you're pulling in people of all walks of life to tell their story of grief. And so I just had it in the back of my mind. And then Sammy, the owner of Fishbowl Radio Network, we had been talking for 3 years, Alan, 3 years to come do a show. And it just was never, I don't know why, it was never the right time. And so finally, I could visualize the thumbprint. I can visualize, and say, out of however many billions of people in the world, none of us have the same fingerprint.
Yeah.
And that's how I've always looked at grief. It's a completely individual journey, unique. There is no right or wrong way. There's no rule book or handbook on it. And the only thing I'll tell people is that if you start to go down a dark rabbit hole of addiction, whatever that may be, alcohol, sex, drugs, shopping, to try to mask that, then that's when you got to get help. But outside of that, it's a daily journey, and sometimes it's an hourly journey, but it's really a daily, monthly, weekly journey. So I just woke up one day and I was like, I'm tired of putting it off, and so I called Sammy and I was like, I'm ready to do it.
Yeah.
So I think we've done 6 or 7 shows, and and so people think, oh, you're doing a podcast on grief, but it's really, I think, wanting to take it from an inspirational standpoint and a connectivity standpoint to other people, to just say we're all dealing with a loss, whether it be loss of a loved one, but it could be a divorce, it could be a marriage, it could be a relationship, it could be the death of a dream, something, you have to put it on hold or it didn't happen. So it's really just kind of loss, and how do we process it? How do we get through it? And I, studied a lot. I've been studying a lot about it, and people just, it's like anything else. How do you process something heavy? So we launched it, and it's still kind of shaping and molding into what I want it to be. But so far, I really like it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're doing it, and it's been good to be a part of it with you and just watch it grow too. And
yeah.
I thought you said something really powerful, because, I know those who watch this show, we're very much here, and even Gabe and I in our discussion last week, it's like, there's something about turning over every stone, and especially with our medical health, as it pertains to our mental health. And so I thought that was a really prudent reminder of, like, when we're taking care of ourselves, to make sure that, you're getting to the doctors if you're having any type of symptom that feels off.
Yeah.
And even just for checkups and
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and at the end of the day, like it's sort of like the oxygen mask, right? When you're saying that you're on the plane and people say, well, if the oxygen mask comes down, what do you do with it first? You have to put it on yourself first. Because if you're not oxygenated and getting oxygen, you can't help anybody else. And sometimes particularly women, I think we sometimes become that caretaker role. We become the enabler role. We take care of everyone else before we take care of ourselves. And for those kind of dating myself, but there was a show called Desperate Housewives on ABC.
Gabe, you ever watch that?
I have.
It's hilarious. Terry Hatcher. Yeah. It was just a fun. It was a fun show, kind of a dark drama comedy. But Terry Hatcher on that show, who a lot of people knew through different shows throughout the 70s and 80s and 90s, she wrote a book called Burnt Toast. Mm-hmm. And it was really the concept of, why am I taking the burnt toast? Yeah. Because when you're entertaining, I can't give that to them. Oh my gosh, I got to give them the best toast. And then realizing that all that's left is the burnt one.
Yeah.
And it was really profound to read that book and going, yeah, because I'm kind of like the burnt toast person. I'm like, no, you take it, to the point like I'll do without. Yeah. And so I think that's the same thing with grief and with loss and with imbalance, of in America, we're busy. I mean, it's too much. And we don't know how to relax. We don't know how to rest. We don't know how to stop. Because I know me, I'm the same way. I mean, you could go 24/7 and still not be caught up. Yeah. So you have to find, and it's forcefully at times, you have to forcefully say, I've got to put this phone down. I've got to step away from the laptop. I'm exhausted and I have to recharge. And it's hard for us to do that, but particularly when you're dealing with the loss of a parent, loss of a spouse, loss of a brother, sister, son, daughter, your equilibrium is just completely off.
Yeah, and I always remind
people.
The
axis is completely off.
Absolutely. I remind people with grief and loss in my clinical practice that anytime you experience a new loss, you're gonna feel all of the unresolved losses in your life. That's why I'll have people do an exercise where they sit down from birth till now and write down every loss they could possibly think of, even that time when they were a kid that they lost their favorite toy.
Yeah.
Because when we lose,
we remember that.
Yeah, we feel it. I see you shaking your head too, Gabe. You feel that that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when I just run across people that are going through things or whatever it is, whatever kind of loss it is, it's easy to empathize with that because you've experienced it in life too at a certain point. I think everybody has a story about something that they thought was going to go one way and went the total opposite way. They've had stories about losing people. It's a lot of examples, and so everybody it's easy to empathize in those situations.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of your show too, Kim, is giving a space also to tell your story and process it, and giving space to a wide range of different types of losses.
Right. And I think that so far, I mean, it's the response that I've had on texts and DMs with Kenny Gant. Kenny, the Shark Gant that played for the Dallas Cowboys, won a Super Bowl with them, and then played for the Tampa Bay Bucks and won a Super Bowl with them. From Florida, I mean, outside of Drew Pearson and him, I don't know of anybody that's had over 22 to 23 family members, close friends, that all within a 15, 20-year period. It's tragic. And how, talking to Kenny, it's really been enlightening because he's really raw about it, and telling the story and how he had to internalize it and wasn't sure how to process it because growing up, especially in the Black community or communities of color, they're not supposed to show their emotions. And sometimes even in our community, in Caucasian white community, like depending on your family background of who you're with, whether it's a significant other or is it a parent or is it an aunt or uncle, like some people just the way they were raised, like you don't show emotion, and you have to internalize that. Well, that's tragic on its own because there's no method to get it out. Yeah. You can't show it, so you're suppressing. You're just building this internal pit within And then realizing that if you're not processing it in a healthy way, then it's coming out in unhealthy ways. Anger, addiction, whatever it may be. So, so I just really wanted it to be, and I feel like it is that way. It's just a conversation.
Yeah.
And how do we, what have you learned from grief? What has it taught you? Because I call it the uninvited guest that never leaves. Because when you physically lose someone that passes away, that's not reversible. And so it is an uninvited guest that is pretty much your companion forever until you pass. And so there's a lot of emotions that go into that because you don't want that person there.
Yeah, it's multi-layered. Quite a few things I could say here. Gabe and I actually, over the last couple of weeks, we've had plenty of conversations about this concept, and also just from the standpoint of like men's emotions. But you made a comment in the beginning of your podcast tonight about when people ask you about your podcast and they're like, oh, is this heavy? It's like, as a therapist, I get that conversation and question a lot where it's like, is it heavy to hear people's feelings in and out? And it's like, whatever the deal is, I think there's something really fascinating about what you were saying with Kenny Gantz, right? Yeah, is that I think we get siloed, right? We believe our culture is different, right? But what is different is the way each culture processes those things based on what we've been passed down and the beauty of our cultures. Yeah. But the biggest issue is kind of how you and I, Gabe, have been talking in different topics about, like, sometimes people just don't share. They don't know how to talk
They
about
don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah. Communication is a lost art in general. I just think it's difficult to really illustrate how you're feeling because we don't, if you're not in tune with that, you're not going to be able to speak it. Let alone just communication in everyday life is diminished significantly. So, it's one of those things like you said, I don't think culturally we're all that different, but the processing of information and how we process situations is different because it's rooted in experience and history and a lot of things that are associated with that. So,
let's talk about cell phones. We were talking about that in my show with you, is that we have conditioned society now to where they talk through the phone. They don't talk to each other. And I always think that what's the world going to be like? What's America going to look like in 10 years when people are so accustomed to being introverted on that device that nobody knows how to negotiate a contract anymore because they don't know how to talk to people. So I feel like we're already kind of getting there where it's like people aren't comfortable. If you ask somebody at Walmart, where is this in aisle 4, and they tell you they don't know, then I get mad as a marketer, and I'm like, no, wait a minute, because you're running those commercials, and I see that guy in that blue vest that will take you anywhere in the store and show you anything that's there, and that's what you're presenting to the world, but that's not what you guys are doing. So it's just, I get kind of funny about that kind of stuff, but we aren't talking to each other.
Well, it's a massive problem, and I talk with a lot of young dudes in my practice who are like, it's interesting, the younger they are, the more terrified they are, not just to approach women, but to talk to like dude bros, you know? I always tell them this, and maybe you'll get a kick out of this, Gabe, because you've gotten to know me, is like, I'll share with them, like, I'm an awkward extrovert. Like, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to get to know you. But like, I'm all, like, with my mannerisms, I'm a big dude. Sometimes I can be a little awkward, like even with handshakes sometimes, you know? But it's like, I still do it because it's like, here's a wonderful person who wants to connect with me, and I'd love to get to know them.
Right.
And, I know that's been our interactions. It's like, like you were saying, the communication there, that's a lost art. People are getting more and more scared. I think media is a big part of that because they're not utilizing media for stuff like this, conversations like we're having. They're using it for like keeping up with the Kardashians and things like that. Not to knock them.
No, we're living in a.
There's a time and a place for everything. And I think it's just like we're over consumers. And so when it comes to being locked into our phone and just constantly scrolling, like that's a habit for us. It's like literally become
it becomes there's an idle time. So what do? We start scrolling. Instead of reading a book, getting up, going for a walk, put the damn phone down.
Yeah.
Even in awkward situations, the first thing you want to do, all right, let me just act like I'm doing something on my phone.
Right.
Like,
Yep. Even if you're not.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Sure.
So I think we just have a tendency now to choose that over communication, over really engaging with people. I noticed that I have a 14-year-old nephew, and he's in that age where he's like starting to become a teenager. Like it's the teenagers all over him. Yeah. And so communicating with him now versus when he was a baby or when he was little is drastically different.
Yeah.
And so you kind of got to meet him at their level, but it's a very weird dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially with the technology, they're not like, well, and I don't mean to like compare, but they're not like the teenagers when we were teenagers.
We were outside every day. We didn't have a computer. We didn't have a phone. We were outside playing until it was dark, and your mom's out on the front porch telling you it was time to go home and eat dinner and go to bed. Yeah. I mean, we were out doing things. We were socializing. We weren't inside on a phone.
Yeah, and I think to tie it to your show, your topic, it's like I think it's inconclusive as to whether or not over time that's going to be the worst thing, but the thing that will be bad that comes from an over media sized culture is the loss of the connection with people in person.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Yeah. I mean, listen, I can also say, being an entrepreneur, and I'm an extrovert, but I'm also a little bit of an introvert to where I need that recharge time. So I'll my friends call me the submarine because they'll be like, when you go under, like you go under. Yeah. Versus, then I come out. But I do need sometimes that time of just quiet where I don't want to talk to people. I think when you talk to everybody all day for work and then you get home, like I do understand the whole men thing is like, I've been talking all day. I just need some quiet time. And just because it's quiet doesn't mean I'm upset with you in any way. People get uncomfortable in the awkwardness of silence. But to me, like I thrive on that sometimes. So I think there's a balance. I think, one of the things I share with you a little bit briefly in the Valetudos, my friend Robin and Christy and her husband just lost their son Logan last week to a drug overdose. He was in a sober living house, and he'd been addicted to fentanyl. And for some reason, the drug dealer just was blowing him up on his phone. And I think the sad thing is they're never going to know why he didn't just block him. Yeah. But for some reason, that drug dealer knew that he had money in his pocket that day. And so he was blowing up the phone, but you got to do, and then they can't find him, and they find him in the bathroom, and he's gone. So the thing that I told Logan's mom is that, and I feel like it was kind of God talking through me. I really don't know where it came from that day at the celebration of life. But I just told her from, I think, things I've read and things I've seen through other families, is I said, now that this is over, everybody's, people kind of go into their own silos again. They're going back to normal life. They'll check on you from now time and then, but then it's like they're going into their normal life again. So that your husband and you guys are going to grieve differently. I said, you should come up with a safe word. And he walks in the door from work. He's all excited, wants to talk to you about his day. You're in a deep, dark place because you just like have nothing left. Instead of like creating that friction, say the word pineapple. Hey, I'm in a pineapple mood right now. And then he knows it's not him and it's okay. Okay, great. I need to go. Maybe I'll go work out. Maybe I'll go do something. You just have to find ways to communicate that sometimes you're not okay.
Yeah. That's one of the benefits in relationships too, is having like boundaries that are communicated like just right here.
Yeah.
So that when the world is doing its thing, we know we're on the same page, the same script.
Right, and it doesn't have to jive with what everyone else thinks it does.
And it doesn't always have to jive with each other.
Right.
Most times, and that's, we've had this conversation about that Love is Blind show.
Absolutely.
Most times.
I watched that show, by the way.
Most times, relationships are about navigating all the chaos to stay in peace.
Yeah.
And that's why that show gets so much viewers, because it's young relationships only in chaos, right? But the ones that do well are the ones that have those little inside boundaries that when things are going wild outside, they communicate clearly.
And those are the ones they show the least on TV.
It is.
That is true. Oh, well, it's ratings. I was in TV for 27 years. It's ratings.
I get it.
But I think also, Alan, that's important is that one of the things I told Logan's mom too is I said, you don't have to say yes to everything. And I think that's important when you're trying to balance your mental health. For me growing up, I was type A, an enabler. Mom and dad divorced when I was 5. I became kind of the pseudo mom. I wanted to protect my mom and my brother. So I was like doing everything and I needed to say yes to everybody. I think as I've gotten older and have experienced grief, losing my mom and then losing my dad last year, that I just tell people, one, it's okay to not be okay all the time. Because none of us are okay all the time. Yeah. We all need to find, whether it's someone seeing you, to have an outside party to listen to them objectively, or a friend that you can call. But you also don't want to put yourself in situations where you're not ready to go out in public maybe and wear a mask and tell everybody you're okay, and inside you feel like you're dying. Like, don't go. And that's what I was like, just if people start asking you to do things and you really don't want to do it, your gut will tell you that you really don't want to do it. You don't have to do it. Just say no.
Yeah, well, and a huge part of the grief and loss process is boundaries. Yeah. I thought it was really important what you had stated as well about grief is that unwanted guest, that when it shows up, it never leaves. And I thought it was profound, a really important way to put it. And one of the ways I educate on grief is that it's one, also emotion, but it's also a philosophy in our lives around suffering. So there are eternal truths in life. One of those eternal truths is that life is suffering and that we're all headed on a steady path towards grief. And what's important is how we handle it when we get there.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me, and maybe you've heard of this poem, but the Guest House by Rumi.
No, I am not.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful, and I'm not going to verbatim quote it. I'll probably butcher it, but
Rumi, R-U-M-I?
Yeah, R-U-M-I. And he talks about how the emotional experiences are guests that we should welcome, even if they come in and tear up our furniture, right? Because they're going to leave. And in the sense of grief and loss, the feeling of grief will leave probably shortly as the feeling of anger or the feeling of sadness or that deep, profound sense of loss. But it's those guests are all part of that philosophy that's never going anywhere once you've experienced it.
And they can come back and visit again and again, right? And so I call them grief triggers. It's been an interesting day. It's been 10 years. So this morning at 1:52 a.m., my mom passed away on March 29th, 2015. And I can clearly physically close my eyes. I can see what I was wearing. Like when you've had people say very defining things happen in your life, you remember where you were. You remember where you were on 9/11. You remember where you were on January 6th, the insurrection. You remember, these things, and you can close your eyes and put yourself in there as clear as day. And so there are grief triggers too. So I really thought that today that I was going to be more of a mess because the leading up to, because when you lose people, their birthdays are important, but the day they depart you is also important. We never forget that day. Ever. I mean, we know that date's coming. And so for some reason, I think it was just, like there's been some years on this date that I can't get out of bed, that I was just heavy. I just was like, I'm just going to stay in bed. I'm going to sleep and I'm going to watch a movie and I just don't want to talk to anybody all day. There are other days like today, like I've cried once and it wasn't cry like sad. It was more just, I ache because I miss her so much. But then as a believer, for me, I know that if God said to my mom right now, do you want to go back to earth? My mom would say hell no and then apologize to God for saying hell in heaven. Because she'd be like, hell no. Because who wants to come back to this fallen world? I don't. Once I go, who wants to come back to this fallen world? So, I know where she is. And so that gives me tremendous peace too.
Yeah. Well, there's hope in that too. And for those listening who, maybe you're spiritual, not religious, agnostic, you don't believe anything is out there.
Right.
Well, I work with those individuals all the time. And I tell them this is like, when you start to venture into the realm of taking care of yourself, you're probably not going to stay there very long before you start to realize that there is at least something, right?
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate, we talk about spirituality on this show, and any topic around the concept of God is welcome in this room. And I always come back to like, you know, when we see the microphone, for instance, right? We don't question the technology that makes this work. Clearly, we have
Right.
some kind of imperfect proof that it works, but we don't get into the nitty gritty of like the electrical pulses.
Yeah, I got to take it off
the
and look at
yeah.
all how many wires. I mean, we just know it works.
Right?
Yeah.
And we trust that when it plugs in, it'll work. And well, isn't that the world that we live in all around us?
Yeah.
We just trust that this is all kind of staying together. But at its base, your microphone is made up of atoms that are just kind of swirling around, sticking together. And we just kind of trust that, well, that's science. That's just the way it works.
Right.
It's like with very imperfect proof, it's really not that hard then to extend that logic to
Yeah.
there's a higher power that's taking care of us. And I don't care who you are, where you are, what you're doing. If you find yourself like not just believing but trusting in something like that I've never seen anybody cope with grief in better ways than
absolutely.
than trusting that we're taken care of on a grander scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's important when you're navigating grief, I mean, obviously you have the critical acute when it just happens. And, you know, one of the things I think that's helped me the most is perspective and gratitude. So there's something to be said when time, because it does sound cliche that in time it's going to get better, but it does.
Yeah.
It just does. You become much more accepting. You can't change it. You're either going to lay down and crawl in a fetal position and die, or you're going to keep moving through it. And so you have to find a way to invite that uncomfortableness in and push through. And talking to people, getting therapy, writing, journaling, reading, those are all great. But the other thing I think that's really important is finding like ways to honor them. So
Huge.
like I know last year on this day, I took off work and I went downtown Grapevine, and my mom and I love going to downtown Grapevine and going in all these little boutique stores and stuff, and went into a couple bookstores, and then I went over to this winery because she loved the frozen sangria. So I went and got a frozen sangria, and I just wanted to be present with her memory and reminding myself of the things that we did that made us happy, and we would laugh, and just knowing that, you know what, like there's a part of her in me until I'm no longer. Yeah. Like she lives within me, and I feel her spirit more and more every year that goes by.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? It's like in any setting I've ever been in clinically, and even with my own therapist around my losses, the process always comes to the conversation of honoring the things we've lost, the people we've lost, the situations. And there's this tie-in you were talking about of like when we honor those people and that we hold dear, there's a reason to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And there's a tie-in, like that's what our whole country was founded on. Is like honoring what's come before us, but also here's what we're going to do now.
Right.
And
it's a part of you.
Yeah, it's a premise of like,
I'm not
who
here
we
without my
are.
mother.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a part of her and my dad that are going to live in me because they made me.
Yeah.
So, I think the thing that I realized what I wanted to say it's important is that gratitude. I'll give you an example because I'm a member of a lot of grief groups. And, I look at some of these men and women that I'll read their stories. We're on chat groups, and I lost my mom when I was 17. I lost my dad. My dad was murdered when I was 19. Or my mom died in childbirth. I never knew my mom. And so there's these stories, or, they were tragically taken. So for me, when you hear that, and it sounds cliche to say somebody always has it worse, but it's true. And so I cannot even begin to imagine to know who I would be at this moment if I had lost my mom when I was in high school or in junior high, or my dad. So what I have found in that is to be grateful.
Yeah.
I'm grateful and thankful, tremendously so, that I had her for 47 years of my life.
Yeah.
Because I'm everything I am because of her through my formative years. Same thing with my dad. Like I had my dad for 75 years, you know, his 75, you know, for me 56. So what a blessing that is.
Yeah.
We're not going to get forever.
Right.
I mean, we all want the 100-year plan where we live to be 99.5 and we're turning 100. We lay down, go to sleep, and we're in heaven. Like that would be great. And some people get that, and God bless you for doing it. That's not the normal of the world. Yeah. So when I hear other people that have experienced that and they've lost their identity and they didn't have a mom, or God forbid they didn't have a mom and a dad, and then they were raised by some terrible uncle or aunt or there's horror stories, and I just go, oh my goodness, like that gives me perspective on the loss, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, and that whole realm that you talk about, there are some pretty natural conclusions to that we see in society all the time that leads to resentments and high expectations of situations, fears of abandonment, neglect,
Right.
a lot of shame. And it's interesting because when someone wants, how we were talking about in your show, like let's say someone wants to get sober, 12-step programs are for those who want it, not those who need it. And that's true about any venture in our mental health. But when people want to do that, and they've been having a hard time, let's say, honoring their parents in those difficult situations where they've been hurt, the process is so beautiful to watch as people navigate through to look at their part in it.
Oh, absolutely.
And see that the other person who may have hurt them and probably did.
They see a lot more grace for that person
yeah,
because they
they're
realize
just
their part
imperfect.
that they played to make it really extremely difficult.
Yeah. It reminds me a couple weeks, Gabe, you were talking about this just kind of like in coming from a very strong, moral and valued home and just kind of being able to see like the imperfections in people, but also like it really stuck with me a couple weeks ago hearing you talk about your family and honoring them even on this show. I thought it was really powerful.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. It's a blessing to have the structure that I had growing up. My parents did an amazing job, just with everything across the board. That even the stuff that they were going through that maybe I didn't know about, that kept me from having any drama and waking up to loud arguments and stuff like that. I didn't have that. So I'm extremely, extremely blessed for their relationship, their foundation that they laid, and it's actually what I hope to cultivate in my future relationship. So, I'm just very blessed, and I hear so many stories. I have friends that don't have that story. I have friends that were only raised with a mother and was only raised with a father, and so they lost a parent while we were in school or whatever. It could be anything. But I'm blessed to have the structure that I have. And so, I'm just appreciative of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I bring that up too because like I'm sitting here thinking like what a blessing it is to sit in this room with the two of you who are doing beautiful things and giving back in the world and doing things that you value and sharing positive messages. It's a powerful thing when we get together and have these discussions.
It is, and we should do more of it, right? I think that's because we're living in the soundbite society. I call it the TMZ society, and we're living in the gladiator. You guys are probably too young, but there was a movie called The Running Game. It was The Running Game, and Richard Dawson was the MC, and it was gladiators, and they were running. They had to compete to their death, and everyone's in the arena chanting, you know. And so I feel like that's our society with social media. That we've got these bullying groups, and we've got these groups that, all right, we're all going to show up and do Fight Club at this event, you know, and they come and beat the crap out of each other or whatever it is. Yeah. We just it's dark, and so I think there's more. We're going back to my Instagram. I really try to make my Instagram inspirational, you know, because I feel like that's a legacy for me. When I leave this earth, that page is a legacy, you know, to. The more we can pour into people and the more we can inspire people, it's just the better world that we have. Instead of it being kind of all about me, the me-centric society, which God knows we have enough of that.
Yeah, you know, I think the way that as I've gotten to know you, that you go about it is like, you know, and we'll get into this, the Blackwater here, and you go out and you make things, right? You make this new show, you've written a book, you know, you've worked for some people who are out there doing things where they move and shake, and now you're giving a platform to people to talk about their journeys and that. I mean, you make things.
That's nice of you to say, yeah.
Well, it's observable. Yeah, and it's been fun the last couple of weeks.
I know, getting to know you. It's been a blessing. I know, I love it. I'm just like, I feel like I have a great new friend, and and that's what life's about, right? And for me, it was funny because in 2024, I don't know why, the end of 2023, and maybe it's just kind of being like I don't want to say an enabler, but always thinking I can help everybody, and and there's just only so much of me to go around, and so I really started, because I knew that I wanted to get to a point where we were going to launch this part of this private brand and do things, and it was like I have to be more selfish, and I have to be more discerning, and so I really, if you are a believer, like, be careful what you pray for sometimes, because when you pray for patience, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
And when you ask for discernment, boy, you're going to get it. And it was quickly that I prayed on New Year's Eve. I always kind of look at, what do I want the end of this year and going into the next year? And I was like, I want discernment. I want to know, I need to know who some people around me are. And are they around me for the right reasons, or are they around me for the wrong reasons, just for what I can bring to them? And it became very clear very fast.
Yeah.
And that was a blessing. It became very clear very fast, because it doesn't necessarily hurt any less the things I experience, but I would rather know, cut my losses, say, bless your heart, I let you go into the wind, and I'm going to move on with me. And so I think also that as we age, and as we become more anchored in what we know we are and who we are and what we represent to the world, we put up with less crap. And it's creating those boundaries that we're just not going to veer from.
Yeah. Yeah. With wisdom's an eternal, right?
Yeah.
It's like knowledge is fleeting, wisdom's eternal.
Yes,
and,
it's true.
And, with learning experiences comes that wisdom of boundaries of like, okay, I've been around this block,
Right. I think Susan Sarandon said it best, and when she turned 60, she was like, oh, the best years of my life, because now I just don't put up with any crap.
Yeah.
She knows herself, because as you age, you really start to know yourself, right?
Yeah.
Create those lanes and go, yeah, I'm not going back down that road.
Yeah. I noticed Gabe was giggling too. And when you said, when I pray for this, how quickly it shows up, I always joke with my clients is like, I prayed to find someone who would hear me and listen to my struggles. And very quickly, a therapist appeared to ask me what my part was in that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing in grief too, and really just in life, is that we don't give ourselves enough time to process things. We're just sliding, scrolling, like it's hard to do, to stop the rat race, but you have to.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with anything deep inside.
Right.
And I guess that's something, I don't know where I ever got it from. I don't know if I got it from my mom or my dad, maybe a combination of both, but I'm a processor. I have to process things. And the way I do that sometimes is I just have to talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I have to say the same thing 1,000 times just to get it out.
Yeah.
And then, and some of my really good girlfriends, they know that about me. Like, I can't hold it in. I have to get it out.
Yeah.
And then go da da da. So I think even if you're alone and you feel like, I don't have any friends or whatever. I mean, there are times when I'll be in my car and I'll just hit record because I just want to know someone's listening. It's me on my phone. But it's powerful sometimes when I listen to those things back to what I'm really saying, completely free, no filters, no editing. I'm just sharing what I feel, and I'll record myself. And I do that sometimes where I won't always listen to it back for a long time, but sometimes I listen to it back like a week later, and it's like, wow. There's power in that, though.
Yeah. I heard someone say a long time ago, and it's also written in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, is we got as sures in black and white. We wrote it down. And I swear, like, if I don't have someone to talk to, if I write it down, my goodness. I also want to check in over here because you had something to say a moment ago. I saw it all over your face.
Yeah. I mean, just circling back a little bit, I know that I'm a believer as well, and so I believe that God will give you exactly what you ask for. And it's a lot of times we ask for things that we don't really know
We
his
don't
intentions
understand what
for.
we're asking for,
Right,
but he sure
exactly.
does, yeah.
Like, and with him ordering our steps and kind of operating within us, like, it's kind of hard for us to ask for certain things without, because we don't know what his plan is.
Right.
Like, his plan is totally different from our own, and I think sometimes we get caught up in how things are supposed to look like for us.
Yeah.
And that's selfish in a sense.
And my mother had a great saying. She's like, man plans and God says, wait a minute.
Yep, exactly.
Or you hear man plans and God laughs and says, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing, is that we as humans want to control every single thing and want it to be exactly this way. Well, that is not how life is.
Yeah, we call that insanity. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more powerful. I've seen some people come back from the brink of just the most chaos you could ever imagine. And one thing in prayer that I've seen that's really important in social science is when that person shifted from praying for things for them and started praying for things for you, their lives changed.
For sure.
It gives me goosebumps to think about it, because I know it's worked for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I see, as you guys have talked about it, like that's what you're preaching as well, and it really is powerful.
But let me exactly, and I want to add one thing, because he does want us to tell him the desires of our heart. He does want, we are allowed to ask for things. And I think sometimes that in my spiritual journey that I was praying so much for everyone else that I would forget to go, and I'll just say sometimes, like, the desires of my heart, or how I feel about this subject, ultimately, like, what I think, is that what you want for me? Because you have to show me if you give that to me, then I know, there you go. But sometimes he shuts a door but your ego still wants that. And then you're like, ugh, and he pulls you over here. So that's, you just have to, it's a growth. You're constantly growing. You're constantly shifting. You're constantly pivoting.
Yeah. And something that I was taught is that the peace of God is in how he says yes. Yeah. So his peace, the peace that he grants us, is in his, yes, this is for you.
Yeah.
That's
when something is for you, nobody can take it from you. It's yours.
Yeah.
Because he ordained it that way.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of one of my bigger takeaways from just being around my family. Like, that's something that they operate in.
Yeah.
And I've seen it work.
That moral structure, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can feel it. And that's why I share on here, and if you watch my other videos too, I talk about that so much. Is like, as a social scientist, I pick no bones about a higher power, a God. There is something, it's observable. There's a lot of empirical research on it, just not the research you're going to hear about every single day in the media.
Yeah, exactly. It's there. Yeah, for sure.
I want to take a minute, because we're going to close out here in a minute. Where can the viewers of today's video find you?
So I am on LinkedIn, just Kim Francis on LinkedIn, Fingerprints of Grief on Facebook. So go follow that. And then on Instagram, it's Kimmy Franchise. That was a sports analogy. It was kind of fun. And then, I think those are the main ones. My website's being developed now, so.
Good. And give us a quick blurb on Blackwater, if you...
Yeah, so pretty much, I guess I would just tell everybody to go look up the website, gtxorganics.com. That is Dr. Norbert Shiraz. He is from Ghana, and he started studying, when he came to America to get his education, he started studying the fascination he had with fulvic acid, Fulvic acid from the earth, because underneath the earth there's all these acidic properties, or mineral compounds and stuff that underneath there that has nutrients and minerals in it. So fulvic acid, humic acid has been around for millions of years, and he really became fascinated with trying to understand the power of that for the body. So he was head of Texas A&M agriculture for almost 20 years, and he started working with miners and to mine and bring the compound up from the earth. He has a mine between New Mexico and Texas now, where he has a lease, and he then brings up the compound and he takes it to his manufacturing facility in Amarillo, Texas, and he has pretty much defined and become the world's leading expert in fulvic humic minerals for human and animal consumption. And he created, I believe in 1994, he created GTX Organics, and now has developed a proprietary blend where you can extract that into a human concentrate for consumption. Bottom line is this, we are not getting minerals from our food anymore at all. We just are not. And if you have children, the USDA every year goes out, they buy everything that you can eat, they test it, and they start to look at the mineral density and nutrient density. It is a scientific fact today that you have to eat 12 apples at one time, 12, to get the amount of 15 milligrams of iron that we got from 10 years ago. You have to eat 18 heads of spinach today, 18, to get the amount of nutrients you got from 10 years ago. So when you start looking at that going, we're just like a bunch of spaghetti strainers with holes in our body. Yeah. That product there, 1 serving a day, it's a nutraceutical product, will give you 74 plus trace minerals, 9.6 alkalinity, which helps with gut health and digestive health. The more alkaline your body is and the more oxygenated that it centers, the less disease can be present. But it also gives you 5 natural electrolytes. So it's affordable. It's not super expensive at all. And we've been having really tremendous responses from athletes, former NFL players, Olympians, South Oak Cliff football team, and so forth.
And therapists.
And a therapist, yes.
I was telling Kim, she gave me a trial this last week, and I definitely each day felt more hydrated. I could feel more hydrated.
Yeah, and that's the key thing, because it starts to work down to the cellular level, which the fulvic goes down into the cells, and it starts working quickly. We are 96% of a society of dehydration every day, and that impacts your body in ways from tired to your overeating to your irritable and so forth. The more you hydrate your body and you get closer to the perfect 100%, which this will do, you feel better. Yeah. And then you just add the minerals on top of it. It's a piece of cake. Plus there's 27 other scientific things it does for the body. Yeah. So just go to gtxorganics.com. Let them know you heard about it on Alan's show. You can reach out to me. I can get you a promo code, get you a 10% discount. You can try it. Tastes just like water. Yeah. You can close your eyes and it tastes just like water. So yeah it's fun.
Yeah. We'll have it around as time goes on. If you're interested, just ask us about it. And I don't imagine this will be the last time we see Kim on our show.
Or vice versa on mine. So
definitely won't be the last time we see Gabe.
Absolutely not.
We don't exist without Gabe.
You better hope I'm here.
Yeah. Kim, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, no, this was fun. Thanks for asking me to stay.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate it. Thank you, Gabe, very much.
Absolutely.
And, you guys, Fishbowl Radio Network, and check out our shows.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. It's been a blessing to have you. Have a wonderful evening. God bless.
All right.
What's happening? It's your boy Mark Henry back on the On Your Mark show.